in the water already?
I've been in this morning.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, it's cold. It is
ever
cold.
anything else?
Huh?
Is it ever anything else?
No, actually, it's never anything else.
Do you go in for the other side?
Yeah.
Yeah. At Loch End, is it? You go down or?
Well, just below the house.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. In this episode, I'm talking to Annette, whose partner Bob committed suicide 8 months ago, which means it's particularly recent and raw. Annette felt really strongly she wanted hers and Bob's story to be told, but I warn you now, it is upsetting. The reason we've decided to run with it is because if you ever think that taking your life will somehow release the people you love and who love you, then spare a thought for Annette and just what she's going through as a result of losing Bob. Speaking of Suicide Podcast is designed to be frank, open and honest. That doesn't always make it easy listening, so if it is too much, press pause. I'm Pennie Latin, and this episode has been sponsored by a Highland-based firm who chose to remain anonymous, but you know who you are, so thank you. And the reason we're all getting behind this series is for the blunt fact that suicide rates are on the up, and we're all convinced that the more we talk about this difficult and painful subject, the more we stand a chance of making a difference and of saving lives. Speaking of Suicide is made in collaboration with and in support of Mikey's Line, so throughout the podcast we'll remind you of their helpline, and after we've heard from Annette, Shona from Mikey's Line will give us a few thoughts to take away. I joined Annette and Bob's dog Patch on a walk through some woods near Loch Ness. And you come walking this way a lot?
Yeah. Most days. Come on, you.
This is not a bad place to be, is it, Patch?
Oh, that hurts. That's one you didn't notice first to chase, isn't it?
So what we're going to do with this is just chat in a very, relaxed way. If there's anything you don't want to say, you don't say it. You want us to pause at any point, we pause. It's just a conversation, all right?
Okay, sorry, is that a feather? Oh, yes. I thought it was a metal spike for a minute. I just saw the angle, it was just grey.
That's a bit sinister.
What the heck? And you'd be surprised what you'd find down here, I tell you.
So, let's start by telling me about Bob. How did you meet?
We met through reenactment in a non-reenactment kind of way. I've got friends that hold a burn supper at their house every year.
Uh-huh.
And there's anything from 25 to 70 people go. And Bob was there. And this guy looked so fed up, face tripping, really didn't look like he wanted to be there. So we didn't even really say very much. However, later on I found out he just split up with his girlfriend, who was also at the party. So that's why he wasn't very cheery. And then, never thought anymore. In September I went to the Twisted Pistons bike rally up in Kailachan, and saw a very strange looking big tent at the side of the hall, and it was Bob's tent, his reenactment tent. Him and his mate Dave were there as knights. They got asked to come up, so they were at the side of the hall. So we were doing as you do as bikers, parked up, put our tents up, went to go down to the pubs, and the two knights were walking towards us, and I didn't even click who they were at first, and Bob just was like, "Hi, how's it going?" And Mary and I were like, "Hi, all right." That's that guy. And that was it. Never saw him again until the Saturday night, and we were all in the hall, and they were both out of kit on the Saturday night, and I'm always one of the last in the hall at the end of the night, sitting chatting to folk, and he was on the other side of the hall, and he came over, he remembered me again and came over and started chatting, and that was it. All kind of started from there.
How long ago? So how long were you together?
Just short of 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, but just over 4.5 years.
What did you love about him, Annette? What drew you to him?
because the inside part of Bob was just, he was so friendly, he was so knowledgeable, he completely thought about others and very rarely, if ever, about himself. And he just had a charm about him that just drew you into him. I don't even know how to explain it. And he wasn't very romantic or anything like that, but I think because he wanted to be loved so much, he was very loving, but didn't realise it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't think he realised just what he gave out, because he always put himself down. He wasn't a good person. You know, he had an awful temper in a shouty, angry way, and then would get him be angry at the way he reacted to things, and that made him feel even worse.
Be angry with himself.
Yes, very, very much.
So right from the get-go, it sounds like you had a really kind of open, frank relationship.
He was very, very open, a lot more open than me, but I didn't have the issues. Bob was a very complicated person. All through his life, it's completely his abuse and that he had as a child and the upbringing he had very much controlled his life. Come on, Patch.
So Annette, were you aware right from when you got together that he had, for want of a better phrase, mental health issues? I don't know how you'd coin it.
There was obvious issues there, but I didn't for a second realise how badly affected by them he was, and just how deep it all went. That definitely came out throughout our relationship.
And did he tell you when he was struggling?
Sometimes he would shut himself away. He lived in Bucky, so he had his own flat through there, and I was in Inverness. There'd be some days he'd say, "I'm not feeling well, I've got a cold, whatever, don't come through, I'll see you in a couple of days," or something. Now looking back, I see the reasons for that, having a bad day. But he was working in Inverness, so Bob drove everywhere. Driving didn't bother him in the slightest. He would drive through the night hours anywhere he had to go. He'd go to shows, drive down, do a show, come home, a couple hours sleep and off to work the next day and stuff. It didn't faze him at all. And I think that's, if he was doing something he wasn't thinking about in his head, the things weren't going on in his head that were obviously there all the time. But he found it very difficult to interact with people. He found it very difficult to let people in, and he could never understand why anybody would want to be friends with him, or why people would like him for the person he is, or anything like that. He didn't feel worthy of anybody's love, friendship. He couldn't understand. He'd been brought up thinking that he was worthless and useless.
So Bob sounds to have been quite a complex character. What was going on in the events leading up to his suicide? Were things different then? Were there warning signs in it?
Bob had attempted suicide before.
And did you know that?
Years, but yes, he was very open about it. Like I say, he was pretty open about everything that had ever happened. Although we think there may have been more now. Looking back on things, he took an overdose in 2019 in the August. We had a lot of trouble going on with my middle son and his girlfriend that really wasn't good at all. This really, really affected Bob, because he said he could see a lot of Bob's mistakes in Callum from when he grew up, and he was so frightened that Callum would turn out feeling the way Bob felt, having the same sort of issues that Bob had, and he didn't want that. Come on, Patch. Just wants to play. Come on, you, Patch. Come on.
Where was Bob at mentally in, or sort of what were the events leading up to his taking his life? Was something different? Was there anything that you noticed was different?
When he took the overdose, they put him to the crisis centre, and that was the big first time Bob was ever felt he was able to start opening up. He didn't tell his work because I think he was a bit embarrassed, etc. as well, because that whole man thing, it's a bit... and his boss, he wasn't sure how he would react to it, so he just told him he had anxiety issues that were being dealt with, and he thought work was the one thing he was getting right. Where everything else was wrong, work was okay. And then just prior to lockdown, a few days within a week of lockdown coming in, Bob was pulled into the office and made redundant and said he was making mistakes left, right and centre. This was happening, that was happening. Although in hindsight there were some things that weren't clear within the work. That wasn't just Bob, but the majority of it obviously was. He wasn't dealing with work, and he went way downhill after that. Like I say, he thought that was the one thing he was getting right, and then nothing was right in his life, he felt. He had good days, bad days. He got put on more medication, they upped his medication. He went into himself quite bad some days. Other times he would come out, he would do things. He stopped, almost literally stopped driving, because he couldn't, I don't know if it was that he couldn't concentrate, or he just didn't feel safe in himself to be behind the wheel and that. Nothing ever, even at his lowest times, his angriest times, nothing ever made me think that he would do anything. Nothing, even up towards the end.
Even though he'd attempted suicide in the past, and you knew that?
Yeah. I always thought there might be a chance, maybe another overdose, but certainly not what he did, nothing like that. I never thought for a minute. But a few weeks before Bob died, he went, 3-4 weeks before, he went missing, completely missing. The police were out looking for him, everything. And he slept out in the town, at the back of the old graveyard, overnight, where nobody would see him, and just walked for miles. That he left here, he was seeing the CCTV about 7:30 at night, getting into a taxi at the inn, because we didn't have a clue where he was. We thought he was in these woods. We were all over these woods. And the police followed the CCTV eventually and found bits and pieces, but didn't see him after the Greg Street Bridge, and that panicked me then. But like I say, the next day he just walked and walked and walked, and at some point in his head he decided that it was time to walk home. So he was missing for about a day and a half. And somebody had obviously seen it all over Facebook, spotted him on the Scannyport Road and phoned the police, who picked him up. And it was a lovely, lovely policeman who'd previously had issues himself and totally was on the level with Bob, and Bob spoke to him loads, which really helped him as well. So after that, the psychiatrist team had phoned to see if he was home, and said, I think this needs to go to psychology. I think it's more than psychiatry. And he got a phone appointment to assess him. And at that point, Bob was sat, it was an hour and 26 minutes on the phone with this guy, asking every question under the sun. And latterly Bob was getting very anxious and struggled a bit, but did really, really well, because he knew he wanted to be free from it all as best he could. And they asked him if he had any suicidal thoughts, and I was sat next to him, and he said, yeah, I've had quite a few lately. And I was really, really shocked, because again, I had no idea that he was... Bob and I spoke about everything. There's nothing we couldn't say to each other or didn't say to each other. And I was quite shocked, and he just looked at me like a child that's done wrong. And I just took his hand and said, it's fine, they asked him, did he think he'd act upon those thoughts? And he went really, really quiet, and he said, to be honest, I don't know. If you want a yes or no answer, I can't give you one. I don't think so, but I truly don't know.
We're going to pause there for a second so you can catch your breath. And, you know, this is tough stuff, Annette, and I realise that. We're going to continue with Annette and Bob's story in just a moment. If listening to this is striking a chord with you, don't forget, it's okay not to be okay. And if you need someone to talk to, you can text Mikey's line on 07786 20 77 55. That's 07786 20 77 55. Or you can contact them via Messenger, web chat or Twitter, Sunday to Thursday 6pm till 10pm, Friday to Saturday 7pm till 7am. You okay?
Yeah, fine.
Annette, I want to come on to talk about Bob's taken his life. Now,
Yeah.
I know that this is still pretty recent and raw. I can't tell you how brave I think you are for sharing this at all. But if at any point you want us to stop, you know, I can press stop.
Yeah,
okay? I don't want to cause you more pain
No, it's fine.
than you've already been through.
I'd rather
okay?
be out there.
Okay.
I think the more we can do and the more people know about that it is okay to be not to be okay, and things like that, little things like that meant a lot to Bob. He got sent an email from a friend about a dog in a box, which I wish I could remember, and I wish I had a copy of it, and it had real meaning to Bob, and I think that really helped him as well. So little things like this had a lot of meaning to him and really helped him.
So he wouldn't have minded you talking about this?
Absolutely not. He would have himself if he was here, 100%.
Okay. So, tell me about what happened. Tell me about when Bob took his life. You hadn't expected it, even though he'd said that he'd had suicidal thoughts.
I never thought about it after that again, because it was a couple of weeks afterwards. He was getting a lot more edgy, anxious, and literally the slightest thing could trigger him. Nothing literally could trigger him off. It was that bad. But again, because we had so many bad days, it wasn't, although it was happening more, it's difficult to explain, because even though it was happening more, it didn't seem worse, and they had changed his medication, and I think that had an effect as well. He was on quite a powerful medication during the day and then another one at night, and I saw a lot of changes after that. So I think that may be part of it, but the biggest part, like I say, was the psychology. We had been rowing. Is rowing even the right? Like I say, the slightest thing would set him off, and we'd have an argument. He'd go upstairs. He'd been given quite a few methods, tricks, I don't know what you want to call them, of how to deal when he was having a bad moment. Take yourself away, go a walk, go upstairs, just take yourself completely away from that situation for 5 minutes, 5 hours, whatever it had to be, do it. But Bob found it hard to come back in from that, so sometimes it went hours. More often than not, it was hours. The Saturday was okay-ish. He had a wee bit of a, for want of a better term again, a meltdown, where we were going out somewhere, I can't remember where, I think we were going to walk or something, and Bob put his jacket on and sat down on the sofa, and he just collapsed over on the sofa, and the dog straight over, slid himself right up underneath Bob, and he just cuddled him, and within 5-10 minutes Bob sat up and he was fine. There was nothing said. We went out, did what we had to do. What was a normal day anymore? It was like a usual day, shall we say, rather than a normal day. We'd been trying to get a stove into the house for years, and for the last few months beforehand, I'd been getting quotes and people out, and we were trying to get the heating sorted in the house. We thought we had somebody who was supposed to be coming out on the Sunday morning. He messaged me like 7:30 in the morning to say, for the reasons I had made sure he was okay to come, were the reasons why he then wasn't going to come. Bob was really quite annoyed that we'd been let down. I got very, very stressed. Bob struggled to get out of bed that morning, and it was a bit edgy. I was helping Fiona in the shop, so I left, went down to the shop. Bob sent a couple of messages. Sorry, I'm just getting up now. This was like 2 hours maybe after I left, so we're about 12 o'clock by this point. And he came down with a couple of bacon rolls for me for my lunch. He was quiet, but he was a little bit upbeat. He was okay. He'd been out with the dog. Went back home, and for the life of me, I can't. He always picked me up when I was at something. That was the only bit he would drive, was the car down into the village, and he hadn't come, and I'd waited like 25 minutes, and I got back in the house, and I was like, he goes, "Oh, you're late home," and I said, "Yeah, I thought you were picking me up," and he thought I was giving him a row type of thing. And he just broke down again and got very angry. We ended up having a stupid big fight. We were supposed to be going to get a new harness for the dog from somebody in Inverness. And I said, "I take it you're not going to come then," because he went off up the stairs. "I'll go myself." And I was away an hour and 20 minutes maybe, because I got lost trying to find the house. And I texted Bob, which I think he read, if I remember. He was showing online, whether he was on Facebook, whichever messenger, I don't know, but he was showing online, and then nothing. And I sent him a message saying, "I've been held up, can you feed the dogs?" That message to this day has still never been read. I came back home, and I thought, it's weird. The living room door was shut, so even if Bob was still up the stairs, the living room door would never be shut. It'd be open so the dog could go up and down. And we were looking after somebody else's dogs who was in hospital, and all three of them were on the sofa. And I remember thinking it just looked like a really strange picture, but at the same time never thought anything of it, just thought he's still upstairs in his bed. So I came in and I shouted at him, and there was no answer, and I was like, "Oh, for goodness sake." Got up the stairs, and my stairs are on 2 levels. When I got halfway up, I just looked up to go and shout through to him, and he was hanging out the loft. And I ran and I grabbed him, trying to take the weight off the rope. And I couldn't. And at the same time I had come in, my neighbour had driven in, and I ran out the door screaming, "Kevin, Kevin, please come and help me. Bob's hanging out the loft." He ran back and got his fiancée, Roslyn, who's brilliant in situations. Her and my neighbour Morag, who'd heard the commotion, came running over. They ran in the kitchen, grabbed knives. I was phoning the police, an ambulance, and in the meantime they cut him down off the rope. And then we just tried doing CPR and things like that with the woman on the phone, and I don't know, it all seemed very surreal. I don't remember a lot of things. Certain parts of it are missing from them. At some point I had to go back downstairs. I think I lost signal, and I phoned my neighbour in the village who's a nurse, and Mary and her husband grabbed the what do you call these things that they're out in?
Defibrillator.
Yes, a defibrillator, and came over. And as much as half the village had done a first aid course and been shown how to use one, I think with the panics and the moment taking in that, we were listening to what it was saying and trying to get it to work, and we couldn't get it to work. And even when the paramedics, again, it seemed like forever, finally arrived, they struggled to get it going as well, and they were trying to listen to it, and things just I don't know, it was weird. It just seemed like everything was happening but nothing was happening. something. They were putting adrenaline in the bone in his leg. It was on the landing, which is not very big, so I was in the bedroom looking through to everything that was going on. It was just, I don't even know how to describe it. Strange. They wanted me to go downstairs, but I couldn't leave him in case he woke up, which I knew wasn't going to happen. But I had to stay to the end because I couldn't leave him. And even then, I eventually went down the stairs with the police, and then somebody came down and said he was gone. And I think that was the hardest point, because I wasn't allowed back up to see him. So I never saw him again until after the funeral home picked him up from Rigmore. I never got to see him. And that was probably the hardest thing, because we were trying to save his life. I couldn't hug him, hold him. Yeah.
To say how are you now seems like a ridiculous question, Annette. But how do you move on from that experience and those memories of Bob? How have you...
I'll always have Bob's memories. I'll always be there. Bob was very big in reenactment, and he was so good at it, so damn good. He became the person he was portraying, and he did it so well because it wasn't Bob doing it. He became that person. He actually got asked in Edinburgh Castle if he was Sir Thomas Randolph, who would have been over 800 years old, which made him laugh. But he said that also made him feel good, because that person believed that how well he was portraying that person, that he literally was that person. And it wasn't Bob, it wasn't, all the bad stuff wasn't there, and it wasn't important, and it made him feel so good. I think if he hadn't had the reenactment, I think Bob would have been away a long time ago. And when I finally came to putting it on Facebook to announce what had happened, that Bob had passed, one of his old reenactment friends from 25 years ago, had said, I knew this day would come. And it brought it home to me. Just how bad, I don't, even if he'd got the help, I think he'd have struggled. But I do think he'd have survived, if that makes sense. I do think he'd have been able to enjoy life, because a tiny bit of him was starting to, because he had hope, and it was when that hope was taken away. How do I move forward? It's almost impossible. It took me 3 months to move back home. It's there every day. I'm by no means angry at Bob. Yeah. Sorry. I've never been on my own. I've always had my kids. They're now moved away, or the ones just briefly come back. So I've got to rebuild a whole life now, because my life was around Bob. I did the reenactment with him. Never thought I'd see myself in a dress again. We did everything together, so it's tough. It's really tough, and there's good days and bad days, but I try to stay positive, because I know Bob changed me for the better as well. He made me, I'm not a confident person, but I'm more confident, if that makes sense, and I'm more the want there to do things is there more, the belief that I can do them. So yeah, I just have to keep reminding myself and kick myself in the backside daily. Yeah. But we'll get there. And having Patch, who was Bob's dog, is incredible. I possibly couldn't have done it without him. He's been great. Yes, you. He was so good with Bob as well. It was like he knew Bob's mental health. He knew that things weren't right in days, and he would just cuddle into him and like be an extra support, and he made a big difference to Bob as well. And now he's there doing that for me, which is good.
Annette, you've been so brave in talking about this. I know it's been so hard, but
it feels good. It feels right.
Okay.
Yeah, it feels the right thing.
I want to put the light down now and give you a big hug. Come here.
Thank you.
God. A reminder of Mikey's line: if you or someone you know needs help or advice, you can text 07786 20 77 55 or contact them via Messenger, web chat or Twitter. Sunday to Thursday 6pm to 10pm, Friday to Saturday 7pm to 7am. Now here's Shona McPherson from Mikey's Line with a few thoughts for you to mull over.
Wow, what a brave woman Annette is. No one can know what happened in Bob's mind on the day of his suicide or the days leading up to it, but at some point he made the decision to escape his pain, and he had the access to the means to do this. Annette's clearly heartbroken and is wisely taking life day by day. And anyone bereaved by suicide is themselves at risk of suicide. They've moved from supporting someone with mental health issues to having needs themselves. And it's really important that they know they have a right to support. So if you've been bereaved by suicide, please don't be alone with difficult thoughts or feelings. Please reach out to us at Mikey's Line. The other thing to say is, unfortunately, there are long waiting lists for mental health services within the NHS. And this is where charities like Mikey's Line, like Ewan's Room, like the Samaritans can come into their own, not by any means a replacement for the statutory services, but rather as a way to help somebody keep themselves safe while they're waiting for that support to come on board. Because the waiting is an incredibly vulnerable time. So if you're struggling right now, please do reach out for help and reach out to Mikey's Line. If you text us, you'll be listened to somebody who cares. You won't have the burden of worrying about putting your problems onto somebody else. It'll be somebody that you don't know, and it'll be somebody who's chosen to be in that role, who's trained to be in that role. You'll be asked openly if you're feeling suicidal, and we'll have a frank conversation about that. You'll be asked if you have a plan to act on your thoughts, and we'll help you work out ways to staying safe. Finally, it is warm, caring, human-to-human contact, and it can be sustained for as long as you feel you need this support. And our text line number is 077 8620 7755.
A huge thanks to Shona and all the team at Mikey's Line for the work they do, and of course to Annette for sharing hers and Bob's story. This episode was sponsored by a Highland firm who wish to remain anonymous, and the podcast platform is supported by D&D Paving Limited. Please do like, share and comment about the podcast, and if you want to get involved by sponsoring an episode or by telling your story, then get in touch with Mikey's Line. Speaking of Suicide is an Adventurous Audio Limited production. The music is Nana by Tom Ireland.